Timmy, how you doing?
It's
Good,
in the
Joe.
works.
How you?
The architects
You betcha. First place.
Nice whacking the Cardinals 3 in a row, right?
That was a great. George, where's Con Harris? How are you, Joe? Sit down. I just saw Rick at CDMC completely ignored. That's what a lot of people say these days. I just didn't see you there, George.
Your people are out, being out around the house.
Are they?
You gotta come back.
Well, it's not from the general.
No, looking fine.
I love mine. Jeremy's already bored, but this, I'm gonna need their long day. Make this, if you wanna get clear, you can make the meeting go.
Well, I got a council meeting tonight, so it's not gonna really help me much.
You go home?
I'll go. My daughter has a softball game, so I'll go watch a few minutes of that before I come back.
Watch your babies.
Yeah.
Laundry.
I've got a couple more in my office.
I think we have a form, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Kim was just making sure the door wasn't locked, so there wasn't anybody outside wondering why. Why?
We're gonna call this meeting to order, please. First thing we'll do is pledge of allegiance, is our custom. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Turn your mics on if they're not on.
Thank you. Everybody's on? Can you hear me now? All right, first order of business is the approval of minutes for the last meeting. Everyone should have received a copy of the minutes in their board pack. Were there any additions, deletions?
I move to accept as presented.
I will second that. Motion and a second. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. Moving on. We'll go to the approval of claims. And Jeremy, if you'll lead the discussion, please, on the list of claims.
Yeah, we have a few. Self-construction, $35,637.36 is for the Buffalo Street project, as we're near wrapping that construction up. $14,138 for American Structure Point is for the Buffalo Street Plaza design work that's being done. Dara Howard, $11,075 is for right-of-way for the 300 North project. Baker Tilly, $4,711.25 is for the arbitrage services for our bond accounts. And there is another one in here. It's not really a pay in, pay out, but it's just a transfer of funds. Yeah, so as we determined, we were going to reinvest that $1 million as it came up. So this is just basically reinvesting that $1 million from Northern TIF back into that investment for another 12 months, I believe. And then when that's up, we'll decide again whether or not to reinvest it.
One comment on the right-of-way. Jeremy and I attended a meeting with the KEDCO, Kosciuszko Economic Development Corporation, and one of the pieces of advice that they gave us, this meeting was about broadband, and one of the pieces of advice they gave us is any new right-of-ways should include broadband, so that we can add cable or whatever is necessary, fiber, whatever is necessary in that area. So I think we should take that under advisement now and include that in any new. You have any comments on that?
Yeah, just a few, and we didn't go into a lot of detail, so I'm not entirely sure what their projects were entailing. But typically with right-of-way, when we purchase right-of-way, the city of Warsaw owns that right-of-way. So if a fiber company would come to us and say, broadband, or some provider come to us and say, can we use this? We, the city of Warsaw, would have the ability to grant that permission. So the purchasing of right-of-way is not really the issue. Now, when it comes to easements, so I think what they were trying to say, and maybe just misspoke, was when they're acquiring easements or when they're acquiring utility easements, they may acquire them for sanitary sewer or a storm, to make sure you're including that language in those documents, which we are acquiring easements right now for the airport industrial project, some of which could potentially be used for broadband. Some other ones would be immaterial. They wouldn't use them for broadband because they're not going to connect. They're going across people's properties for sanitary sewer rather than along the road where they'd most likely run broadband. So I think it is important moving forward, either as a redevelopment commission, that we do take that into consideration. And as a city of Warsaw, we take that into consideration as we're buying easements or as we're buying other types of uses for property, to make sure we're looking at whether or not it has additional uses outside of that use which we're acquiring. I'd have to go back and look at our easement language. For the most part, I don't get really specific on easement language when we're purchasing easement, especially when we're purchasing along a road for that specific reason. While we might be acquiring it for sanitary sewer, usually our easements are dedicated to public utilities. Now, that's where I think they were trying to reference is, usually you say public utilities. Well, broadband's not a public utility. So you have to be a little bit more precise in the language that you're saying, that public utilities and possibly broadband. Because when we're talking about public utilities, it may include sanitary, storm, water. In Warsaw's case, we don't own water, but in a lot of communities, they may own those three main utilities. So they typically, it's public utilities, which fiber wouldn't necessarily be classified as that unless the municipality was running their own broadband.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that part of language in there. Any questions about the claims as presented? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. I'll call for the motion.
Some move they're approved as
Rick
presented.
makes a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second that.
Mr. Clemens seconds that. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Claims are approved as presented. Okay, under new business. Fenton Brown contract.
Yeah, we have a couple of contracts. The first one, Fenton Brown, is for the 300 North project. This project was awarded and approved by the Board of Works and the Redevelopment Commission. All we're doing today is executing that contract. And Fenton Brown has signed and dated and returned their portion. We're just executing it and sending the signed contract on to them. And if you want to remember, that was $1,880,359.30 was the low bid for that project.
Any changes from what we approved originally?
No,
Okay.
not yet. They haven't started construction yet. We have one utility conflict we're working on now that will probably be a change. What I don't know is to what extent, whether it'll be a dollar change or if it'll wash out. They're going to have to reroute a storm pipe, most likely to avoid conflict with a water line. So we'll see.
Okay. Any questions about this contract?
Move we accept.
Rick moves,
Excuse me.
I have a question.
what specifically, I guess, is the work being done? Is it, it's not the roundabout though, right?
It is.
It is
Yeah, the
roundabout.
300 North project's the roundabout at Sheldon and 300 North, as well as a reconstruction of 300 North from the bridge to Sheldon Street, and then a mill and fill from Sheldon Street to 15.
And that includes the roundabout.
That includes the roundabout, yep. So that intersection will be a round, instead of, right now, it's not even a two-way stop. Right now, it's Sheldon Street stop, so when it's completed, it'll be a roundabout.
What's the timeline?
End of this year.
By the end of this year?
By the end of this year. I
This
think
calendar
they're, this calendar year, yeah, I believe it's usually the first week. Most of our contracts, when we bid out for this construction season, will go to the end of October with substantial completion, and there's usually a week or two in November that it might continue on, but for the most part, it'll be done before the end of this year.
Any idea when they'll start with?
Well, I'm sure they wanted to start yesterday, but given the other projects that they have under construction and the rain, I imagine it'll start soon.
You were saying, Mr. Snyder. Make a motion
To approve.
approve as presented. Mr. Snodgrass makes that a motion.
I'll second his motion.
Jeff, seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Contract is approved. And next.
The next contract is the Baker Tilly Arbitrage Compliance Service, and once again, this is for overseeing the bond issues, the Buffalo Street, the Airport Industrial Park, overseeing those issues for compliance with federal regulations.
Okay, any questions regarding this contract?
No, I'll move to accept the contract.
Mr. Clemens makes a motion to approve as presented. I hear a second.
Second.
Rick seconds that. Any further discussion? Questions? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Contract is approved. Moving right along. North Point contract.
The third contract is a contract with Troyer Group for engineering services for the North Point Drive rehabilitation. This project will be rehabilitating North Point from Husky Trail to Mariners Drive. To kind of tie into the improvements we've done to Mariners Drive as well as Husky Trail, and to include sidewalks. This issue was brought up about a year ago by some residents that live out there whose kids are walking along North Point Drive to get to the school. I had a conversation with Jeff Beeler, the street superintendent, about what his time frame for making changes to or making improvements to North Point, where it was at on his schedule. He had indicated that it was pretty high up on his schedule, so we got together and put this project together, which was submitted for funding through Community Crossings. It was awarded funding by Community Crossings, so 50% of this project will be paid for by the state funds. And this is the engineering contract to complete the engineering on that and bid that out yet this year so it can start construction.
I noticed there's a number of, some of the language has been struck out of the contract. Have both parties agreed to that?
Yes,
Those language changes?
Yes, this contract is from them, is being presented by them for approval. I believe it's for a total of $64,200. There is a $5,000 reimbursable expenses, or not to exceed $5,000 for reimbursable expenses, and that would be to cover any copies of plan sheets for the bid docs, and all. There's usually a software program that they use to get those get the documents out to those that are bidding on them, so that will cover that. I don't know that it'll be exactly 5,000. That's why they just put kind of a lump sum in there.
Not to exceed 5,000.
Yes.
And the lump sum amount was 64.2.
Yes.
I've got a question. If this is the final agreement,
Mhm.
why don't we have a copy that doesn't have strikeouts? It just seems
Odd.
odd.
I mean, I can certainly go back to them. I did not put this contract together. This contract is from them.
I would rather see a contract without the strikeouts.
And I can have that done, and then if you approve it, I can just approve it subject to them reflecting that, removing the strikeouts, and they can give me a new copy. And I can have Tim sign it.
The other question is, it lists all the members of the redevelopment, just sign it at the end. Can we narrow that down?
Yeah, they don't need signatures from all of you.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
The original contract they had given me didn't have the Redevelopment Commission, so he overdid it when he sent it back.
If you would have him get rid of that as well while
Yep.
they're doing the
I can do that.
getting rid of the redactions or whatever. Okay?
I'd make a motion that we approve, subject to all the strikeouts being removed and, or we get a copy, final copy,
Yep.
without the strikeouts. And Tim Myers, president, be authorized to sign it.
Yep.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second that.
Mr. Clemens seconds that. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Subject to.
And we have a very short time frame to turn this project around. While the community crossing funds are great for communities like Warsaw to do additional road projects, unfortunately the time frame to complete those projects is very narrow. So we spent the better part of the last 6 months preparing this project, talking to Troyer about what it's going to take to do it, getting cost estimates. Jeff Beeler did a lot of the work putting the application together to submit to the state. And once we were awarded that money, now our clock starts, and we've got to get this project out to bid and completed before the end of the year. So,
Okay, thank you.
yep.
Okay. We'll move on to the Market Street Senior Housing Project deadline extension.
So we are working with Inglewood out of Indianapolis on, they were awarded senior housing credits for the Market Street project. In our agreement with them, the language was we would transfer the property to them, I think, in April. But they are not prepared to take ownership of that property yet, or by the end of April. So it'll be like first week in May. So he had called and said, we're still getting our financing all worked around. They needed an extension on that. I told them just to put a document together asking what they would want. I put this on the agenda and anticipating I might get something before Monday. I did not. So this will just be kind of an update for you. Project's still good to go, still moving forward. They're just getting all their ducks in a row. So when next month, I'm expecting we will probably have an extension to sign to give them that little bit more time to finish finalizing all their finances.
Okay. And when we receive that document, then,
Yes, yeah, there's nothing you're approving now.
yeah.
Obviously, there's no reason why we wouldn't approve it. It's, I think, an $8 million project, of which they're getting significant amount of state funding. It's affordable housing, which we desperately need. It's senior affordable housing, which we desperately need, which is why we approved the project last year as they were preparing to submit their application. We were fortunate enough that their application was awarded. But like everything else, it takes time to put all these projects in the works. So the nice thing is we're currently using our property as a staging area for the Market Street project. So it's all working out.
Noticed there was a lot of vehicles parked on that property
Yeah.
recently.
So the longer we can use that property for the staging area, the better off it is for us. And,
Yeah.
so yeah,
So
it
no
should
harm
work.
done.
No harm done for us. No.
we appreciate the heads up, though.
Yep.
That may come to fruition, we have knowledge about it, background on it, okay?
Yep.
All right, thank you very much for that. Next item on the agenda is the Gatke property.
Yeah, Rick had requested that this be put on the agenda for this month, just as to discuss where we're at, where we're going, what options we might have. So I obliged late. I did get it on today. You reminded me. So that's really, I'm opening it up to the board. Obviously, currently, we had looked at a couple of different projects over the last few years. They had a memorandum of understanding for one of those projects where we had given them, I think, 6 months to put a feasibility study together. That project, I won't say fell through, but they're not in a position where they're going to move forward at this point in time. Whether or not they come back to the table, obviously they could at some point in time, but at this point right now, it is not in a stage where it's moving forward.
And the memo of understanding has expired.
It has expired, yep. And they have not asked to renew that. They did initially, but my last communication with them was that they're not asking for that at this time.
Was it problems with tenants, you think, or?
I think it was
problems with
timing.
the process?
I think it was timing, and that's why I'm saying I don't want to say that are not going to come back to the table, because they very well may come back to the table. My understanding was that a group of them have other projects that they're doing from a timing standpoint, and those projects are projects they're working on now. So if those projects were completed in the next year or two, they may come back to the table, but at this point in time, they're not ready to move forward with this project.
Good. I understand we have some members of the audience that would like to address. No? Okay, very good.
Question I've got,
Mhm.
is that property, if we want someone to develop it,
Yep.
is it worth more to a developer if it's buildable now? In other words, the buildings are
Yep.
gone.
I don't know that, and I wish I could answer that question and be confident in my answer. I would say it's probably 50-50. Most of the interest we have gotten from the Gatke property is because the buildings exist. So what would happen if the buildings weren't there? I don't know. I've had very few people come to me and say, boy, if that property was clean, I'd build on it tomorrow. And therein lies the problem. If I had a lot of people coming to me and saying, boy, I'd really like to do something there, but you got all that buildings on there. If those buildings were gone, we might jump at doing some demolition to repair it. I'm not saying that that wouldn't help, because I don't know. I only know what has been presented to me, and every project that's been presented to me has at least talked about the main warehouse building staying on the property.
I was
So,
going to say,
could we do some? I think we could. We could help maybe some. The question is, if we were to clear everything else, would it now become more appealing if the warehouse building was just there?
that was
I
my
don't know.
question.
If we cleared the whole site, would it become more appealing? I don't know.
The warehouse building was about the only one that was
Salvageable.
salvageable.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I wish I could say it definitively one way or the other, but all the interest that have been, everybody that's come to us has talked about doing something with some of those buildings. Now, is that because they exist? Maybe if it was a clean site, maybe I'd be having different conversations with them, absolutely. I couldn't say for sure if we demolished them tomorrow, if we would have interest, people interested in doing something. That I don't know.
But if they were demolished, it would end the liability that we have.
Absolutely.
Because they're there.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that,
And that's always been a concern of this organization, is the liability that exists because of those buildings. And for some reason, the fence is gone. I don't know what happened to that, or who authorized that to be taken down.
I don't know.
It happened about the time we authorized the utility companies to put a presence out there.
Is that one?
That's about when the fence went down.
I'm trying to remember. I mean, we could fence it, but then you're spending money to build a fence.
Right.
I mean, to Rick's point, I mean, I'd much rather spend money to demo some buildings than build a fence. But unfortunately, like we've discussed before, this is a prime example of, do TIF districts take money away from other taxing? They don't. If you're not building something, if you're not developing something, there's no money generated.
Right.
So this TIF district is generating very little money to do anything with. It's not even generating enough money to demo the site. So that begs the question, you know, where would we even get the money from? Which we've had a lot of discussions over the years. That, to the point where we had went and gotten bids the last time, we were somewhere close to 150 as the low, 400 as the high for demolition. And that was 8 years ago, 9 years ago. So I would think we're probably even closer to 250, maybe 300,000 to demo. Now that was the whole site. So if we kept the warehouse building, unfortunately the downside to the warehouse building was that was the only steel on the site. The rest is all brick. So I don't know what value the steel had in that case, but I imagine it had some. So now you're taking that out and you're just demoing the other buildings. You're just going to have raw cost of hauling off waste.
Which may
with no,
generate a higher cost.
which may generate a higher cost because there's no salvageable material, unless someone wanted to salvage the brick. And that's a real trick. You know, we ran into that a little bit with companies. Yeah, I can come in and I'd like to keep the brick and recycle the brick, which is great. Oh, by the way, it's going to take me 12 months to do it. So you want you want to oversee a brick salvage contract for 12 months on site, the dust. It's a mixed bag.
I just wonder.
No, absolutely. I mean, we talked, and I said I'd put it on here, and I'm glad you reminded me Monday to put it on. And certainly we can have future discussions as we keep going forward. We have some money in the budget, which you're going to see in June. We can start having conversations about what the next step is.
Yep. We do have Mrs. Pachkowski would like to step to the mic.
May I change my mind? So the reason I'm here, I'm a member of the Kosciuszko County Convention, Recreation, and Visitor Commission. And in that capacity, we're always looking for new attractions to draw people to our community.
Right.
Especially, we want them to spend the night. So with Winona Village, the village of Winona being so close and it draws so many people, we see that site at least having some potential, if it were to become retail and restaurants and that maybe people would stay 2 nights, 2 days, spend a night. So the proximity there makes that attractive to us. Interest, you know, that we've been interested in supporting it or seeing something happen there. I have to say to what Jeremy was saying, most often when that comes up, it is based on, the interest is based on the buildings being there. I don't know, I'm not qualified to know if it could be rebuilt to look as nice as it does, but it seems like every time I hear somebody talk about it, they want those historical buildings to stay if they're going to invest in it. So I guess my point being here, and I thought I'd better say something, we're just afraid that something might happen with your group and all of a sudden it's gone. And some way of being notified, if you're going to set a timeline, if we don't hear something from some development plan by a certain time, it's coming down, just so that we have time to react.
Well, yeah, we would love to have a developer come in and build on that site and put it back on the tax rolls.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, the last pass we had at that fell through. As Jeremy said, it's not a done deal. It's not, they may come back. But if you can bring developers to us for that purpose, we certainly entertain discussion on that point. But also, we have to consider the liability the city has, and that's part of our responsibility as well, is what, how can we avoid some additional liability if somebody gets hurt on that property, as it's no longer fenced in and all that.
Yes, and I'm sure that
And
the
that's-
longer that those buildings are staying unprotected from weather and things like that, things are just getting worse too. So I
Would you,
understand it.
would you agree that that warehouse building's about the only one that's salvageable?
When you say warehouse building, is that the big one with the big,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, not the long?
Well, it's the long building with
the
the
one-
glass windows and the brick.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
not the stack house,
Okay,
or what I would refer to as a smoke, I mean, it had a stack, it's not the one
Yes.
with the stack in
Okay.
it.
Smoke set.
yeah, okay, so yes, I would say there's probably some, I don't know, I think it's
Yeah.
a little bit of both.
Yeah, we would certainly, we have been searching for
Mhm.
developers on that property. Glad to entertain that, but we can't let this go on forever.
No, I understand.
The longer we let it go, you know, the more chances of the city running into a liability problem.
So in
That-
prior discussions with developers, if you're estimating the cost to demolish would be, let's just go low, 200,000, could that be a part of the money the developer could use for not tearing it down? I mean, if it didn't cost you to tear it down? Like in this last plan that you had, that memorandum with, were there some?
We
what
did
were-
not, we didn't get, so the last person that looked at it, we never got down to an actual detail what contributions the city would
Okay.
be. It was merely a feasible, on their end, they were looking at whether or not their project would be feasible. And that feasibility may have had a gap in it, and that gap would be what the Redevelopment Commission would review to say, is it beneficial to the community of Warsaw to participate in that project, to cover that gap in that project?
Okay.
We never got to that point. I don't know what their gap would have been. It was never shared with us whether or not they ever finished their feasibility. At this point, they just had other things they were doing, and it wasn't on the top of their list. So yes, potentially.
Okay.
We wouldn't know. We'd approach it the same, we have on all of our other projects, in that they would come in with an idea, and here's what they're willing to do, here's how it's feasible, how it makes sense in the end, how it's doable, and is there a gap? And then the Redevelopment Commission and ultimately the council would review that in any kind of agreement that we would enter into, to say, yes, this is something the city would participate in, to the Redevelopment Commission, or through a combination of the Redevelopment Commission and the council if they were asking for tax abatements or something to that extent. So there are a lot of possibilities, but until we understand what the project is, what they're willing to commit, and what the potential gap is, it would be hard for us to say that this money or that money, because right now there's not $200,000 to do a demolition. So to say that, oh yeah, we'll give you $200,000 that we were going to spend on a demolition, now the Redevelopment Commission's not even in a position to do that. So depending on all those, but there are a lot of opportunities. I mean, certainly if there's a project that's going to generate taxes, whether there's bond issues or tax abatements, there are a lot of moving pieces. But until we would be able to sit down with what that project is, it would be hard to provide that answer.
Okay. So will this body take any action to advertise that it's open for auctions? Whose role is that, to say to the world, to potential developers out there, that this land is available to develop?
It is the Redevelopment Commission's job to do that. In essence, the city, the Redevelopment Commission, whether we do it through public participation events like we did with the Ball State Charrette a few years back, which is what generated a lot of the interest over the last 4 or 5 years. We haven't done anything like that in the last 4 or 5 years. Maybe that's something we look to do in the next year or so to generate some more interest. But we can't sell property. Well, we can, but it's a bit convoluted for us to sell property, and especially this one, because it has a number of environmental
Issues.
restrictions on it. That's the word I was looking for. So it's a little bit more complicated for us just to go stick a for sale sign out there. But yeah, I mean, if there was a way to advertise, and I think we have. I don't want to say that we haven't. We've had, I mean, the Gacky property has been discussed for 8 years. I don't think there's anybody in Warsaw who's not familiar with the Gacky property. But have we done anything to get it outside of Warsaw? Maybe not. Maybe that's something we can talk to Alan and
Yeah, I'm going to say, we have made it aware, KEDCO, aware of that property that's on their list of available properties for any outside developers coming in to town and asking, checking with Kosciuszko Economic Development, just in case, so they would have it on their list of properties available to develop if it suited the developer's needs.
Well, I'm just concerned now that I'm sure that maybe it'll be covered in the paper, so that if there are any local people that were waiting for that memorandum's arrangement to cease, that they know that it's open again for options.
Yeah, and I haven't had anybody, I think I did, to Rick's point, I think I did talk to somebody briefly. They didn't say they had a project, but they had indicated that maybe it would be more appealing if the buildings were gone. But they didn't come to me and say, I have a project, boy, if those buildings were gone. They just said, well, maybe it'd be more appealing if those buildings were gone. And it's like, yep, according to.
We needed something a little more concrete.
We
than
need
that.
If he had said, I have a project,
I have a dream.
get rid of those buildings, then we would be having a different conversation. So it's, I mean, honestly, I think people know. It's just, it's not going to be an easy redevelopment project. But, you know, that's what makes it fun in the end.
And on the other side too, every proposed project that we have discussed can never show the money.
Yeah.
They can never show they have the backing of anybody or willing to share that with us. Who is going to furnish the money on your side to do this project? So that has been a problem with all the issues, all the projects we've looked at.
We've had, yeah, and we've had two that have gone through what I would say is a near feasibility study, which they were almost complete. And in either case, the original case, they did do enough background. We looked at, there was a design firm that wanted to put a design studio in there, 8, 9 years ago now. And they had done enough research that it was not, the cost was not feasible for them to do it. I think they were coupling it with possibly a banquet hall, and they were upwards of $2 million into the building, and it wasn't feasible. I think we had an agreement with them like 8 or 9 years ago. I think it was like Mohawk Designs or something like that. If you remember, it was Aaron Scantlin, I think. And then this most recent one is kind of the same thing. They had gone to a stage. They had some numbers, and obviously at this point, whether it was timing or they weren't willing to move forward to it, whether or not it was feasible or not, I don't know, because we never had those discussions. But obviously, the money at that point they weren't willing to outlay.
Jeremy, just a comment. It's been a long process. We've heard many proposals and ideas for that property, with it being potentially environmentally restricted, with there being some historical renovation there, with it being a rehabilitation. It creates the need for multiple funding sources for public-private partnership. And during the Stellar project, we looked long and hard. That would have been the time to get public monies, Okra monies, for example. And we found going through that convoluted trail of trying to get government funding for that building, that we didn't qualify. And when we did find, even on the demolition side of it, that we might qualify, we would have had to split it into 2 parts. And the part that was split, we couldn't do anything for 5 years or something, so it severely restricted a commercial use of that property to get this government funding, which didn't make a bit of sense to us, because the whole idea is to get it back on tax rolls. So, the city has done their part trying to come up with those gap funding or gap grants that, might help push a project over the top. And we have not had good luck with that for many reasons, but most notably during the Stellar project and that Stellar timeline, we had some what we thought were pretty reasonable plans, but again, as has been mentioned here, Rick kind of very eloquently said, there's there's projects and there's ideas, and then there's the reality and the sustainability of funding a building, not just building it, but being able to heat it and doing a business that you've got a sustainable project. So I think, I remember back when I first got on council, Dave Miller had a drawing for a car museum there. And he spent a little bit of money to put this thing together, and well, that was pretty good, but, that was just another example of an idea like that. It's a big building, and it costs a lot to rehabilitate it, and then, it costs a lot to heat the thing. And you really have to have to me, a pretty tight project as far as tenants and commitment from tenants to make the thing work. That's what we've learned, and that's what we've not been able to secure.
And we're still trying. We worked with MACOG for the last year and a half now on an EPA grant that will do assessment and eventually potentially lead to demolition money as well. So we're still trying. We're still working on it. We'll continue to work on it. There's no guarantees, obviously.
But I would agree as well that the vast majority of projects that we've been approached about included those buildings. I think if you definitely going to attract a different type of project. But, going back to Stellar, we felt like that could have been a transformational project in that area to start maybe improving some housing, some affordable housing in that area. So it wasn't just that building, it fit that whole corridor, proximity to Winona, being on the trail, being close to the Market Street corridor, and then having some area that would be really prime for redevelopment as far as housing and affordable housing projects. The project really made sense, but you just need that one transformational, visionary,
But he was talking about like the Market
sustainable
Street affordable housing
investment
project
to make it happen. And if that would happen, I think we'd kickstart that area. But it's been a while. It's been tough.
Well, and we didn't get awarded Stellar, but that doesn't mean that all the work we put into it is going to waste. We completed phase 1 of Market Street. Phase 2 is under construction now. The senior housing project, we continued to beat down their door to get that funding, which we got awarded early this year. We've got park projects that I've talked to Larry about that we still want to do that was on that list. So without the state, our intent is to still see our plan through to fruition. And we're working on that piece by piece. But the whole point of Stellar is that it gives you all that money within a 4-year period. When you don't have Stellar, you have to do those projects on your own time frame.
And those projects are prioritized, so.
Yeah. And we've been doing that. So we're completing phase 2 of Market Street. The senior housing project will start construction this year, and then
Roundabout, Argonne Road project.
yep, the Argonne Road roundabout project I think is 2021. So all the projects that are on that list, we haven't given up on. We're still moving forward. They're just going to take a little bit more time for us to package, and Nagaki is a big piece of that puzzle.
All right, well, I'll just try and get the word out a little bit. We need to light the fire, and if we're going to do something to save the buildings, we need to do it now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Before it deteriorates further. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, one other thing under other business, are we done with that?
Yep.
Okay. Under other business, if you would mind giving us an update on the gas station that we acquired at Center Lake Park?
It's closed, it's done, we own it, and now we have to clean it up. Unfortunately, I haven't had any time to look at getting bids to see where we're at demolition-wise, but I need to start working on that. Right now, my main focus has been on trying to get the plaza out to bid, which I hope will be, I think the documents are supposed to be done May 17th, so we'll be advertising and going out to bid as soon as those documents roll into my office. So that's been our focus, but it's not lost on me that we need to figure that out as well.
So the next step is get
The next step would be to
demolition
get
bids.
some bids for demolition to find out what we're talking about so I can bring it back before you, because obviously they're not going to do it for free.
Nope.
So we'll have to find the money and
But all those
to do
contracts.
that. Yeah. The nice thing is, I think we're knock on wood, we're in pretty good shape for the plaza. We've got our funding from the state through regional cities. So we might have some money in Buffalo Street, we might have some money in that district, redevelopment district, which just sits in the central TIF, to get that demolition done. So I will put that on my list to make sure we keep moving forward
In your spare time.
in my spare time.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions? Any other business come before this illustrious group?
Move we adjourn.
Trivia question, what is the difference between an easement and a right-of-way?
Easement, you're buying a specific right to that property, and right away you're buying, you own the whole property. So when we buy an easement, we're buying the underground rights to put public utilities. When we buy right away, we're buying the land. We changing ownerships. We own the land.
Good question. Okay. I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay.
Motion to
Everybody in
adjourn.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much for everyone. Nick, did you have anything? We're adjourned. I'm sorry, Nick, I didn't. Okay. Thank you. You gotta speak up if you wanna be heard.